Hello there, Dave here. We are in the book of 1 Samuel, going through from Genesis to Revelation, just trying to get an overview of all the chapters. And I'm in chapter 19 of 1 Samuel, where David is fleeing from Saul. You know, there's a whole thing about the conflict between David and Saul, and then David's relationship with Jonathan, Saul's son, and David constantly fleeing from Saul, hiding in caves. You know, that's where I get my whole Dave's Cave thing that I like to call my YouTube channel and this page sometimes. But the thing was Jonathan defending Saul, defending David, Jonathan defending David between Saul and everything else that's going on, and it just shows the loyalty that they had for each other, like brothers. You know, Jonathan knew that he was never going to be king. He knew that David had been anointed by God to be king. Saul, of course, hated this idea. Saul was jealous. His mind was completely deranged. He did not trust the Lord. He didn't follow God. He just trusted himself and his desires. Even though, you know, even though all this miraculous stuff happened and all these prophecies went about to Saul from Samuel, Saul still rejected, God, and then rejected David being king. David, again, being pursued by Saul. Chapter 20, Jonathan's final attempt to reconcile his father and David, trying to give Saul every chance he can to realize that David is not out to get him. He's not out to get his throne. Jonathan agrees, commits himself again to a covenant with David, which is pretty neat. Saul is, all about the hatred, goes as far as killing people just because he can't stand David. 1 Samuel 21, David goes to Nob, Gath, to Abimelech the priest. There's this whole scene there with David going to the high priests and getting the bread of the presence to feed his men. That comes up later in the New Testament. Jesus says even David went and ate the bread, because he was allowed to do that. He was allowed to do that. But, God is using the bread of life, again, as an illustration, Jesus being the bread of life to his men, to the disciples, to all of us in the New Testament. Chapter 22, David at Adullam Cave, Saul murdering the priests. Again, David caring about only getting away from Saul constantly. Chapter 23, David saves Keilah. David escapes from Saul. Because David goes in there and saves the city from the Philistines because God tells him to. And then the city betrays David. It's like, okay, really? And then you have chapter 24, again, David sparing Saul's life. It's very significant that David restrains himself from killing Saul, not once, but several times. And at this point, he goes into the cave where Saul's relieving himself, cuts off a corner of his robe, and to David, that was a significant sin. That robe was the authority of Saul, his authority as king. A lot of times during that day, the kingly robe, the kingship robe was their authority, their sign of their person and who they were, their kingship, their authority. Just like Jesus in his robe, when the sick woman is going and wants to just touch his robe, just his robe of Jesus would be enough. Because that robe signified the authority, the power of the person. So it's very significant. The hem of the garment, that David, does, because he's saying, I have the authority over David. It's like taking the crown of Saul in that sense. David immediately feels guilty about doing that. It's a lot of importance when we follow the life of David and Saul and all the mistakes that are there, all the things that David does, seeking after God's heart, not seeking to hurt the Lord's anointed, though. We need to remember that. God puts us in important places to do important things. Anyway, and we need to trust him for all that he does. We'll get into chapter 25, which again is another fun story I love. Continue studying the word, dive deeper. Hope you have a great day. God bless, and trust the Lord in all things. Get into his word. God bless.